I forgot to tweet it out. Give me a second here. It's time to tweet. Azer Dungeons and Dragons campaign creation. YouTube campaign creation live stream. So as you can see from the wonderful picture I have up, we're talking about Azer is probably how I pronounce it. Let me tweet it from maybe my phone as well. Retweet. Tweet. It's a wheel tweet. Sorry. And so to talk about kind of what Azer are, I'm actually going to refresh this page so it shows me the correct thing. Need to angle that a tiny bit more. Azer are very similar to dwarves in many ways, in terms of size, a lot in terms of looks. They are broader, stronger creatures that are from the elemental plane of fire, if you can't tell from their hair, or the fact that their hair is fire. So I picked them because they kind of had that interesting background, that they're from the elemental plane of fire. They hate Efreet. So the kind of the fiery genie type creatures. They can live in volcanoes or anything that has a lot of fire to it, and they're the masters of metal and gems, is what they say. So they can work with them very well. So how do you go about creating a campaign around them? I mean, they look pretty impressive. I'm not sure I would necessarily do a campaign or if I would shoot for a one-shot. With them. Sorry, realized I forgot to update the title again. Now it says Azer. But I do think that they can make an interesting bad guy. Around a couple of different ways. One of them is one thing I haven't mentioned yet, is that the Azer are not creatures that are born, they are made. So somebody made the first one at some point in time. It limits how many Azer you have at a time, as they can die, but they tend to be it's just an interesting little twist on them. The other interesting thing and why I kind of picked them is they are a +2, or they're a challenge rating of 2. So if we go back, I think it's in the bookmarks down here. Nope. Dungeons and Dragons encounter calculator. Let's find my normal one if I can here. This one, I believe. Nope. This one. Done. There we are. So if you have 4 4th level players, you have a pretty good XP budget. You're an easy, what they say is easy is 500. A challenge rating 2 creature has 450 XP that you get from it. So you would almost have to do. This would be deadly because this is going to be 3,600. But yeah, they could take on 2 easily, and 3's deadly. But I would say that even a party of 4, pretty often you're going to be able to take them down. They're tricky to hit. They have a high armor class, but they don't have a ton of hit points. They do an average of 10 or 11 damage per turn. So, oh my goodness, the 2 cats are ready to kill each other. Well, one of the cats is ready to get the other cat. It's off to the side. Neither here nor there. So, how can you make something, let's say we have 4 characters at level 10. That's really going to be easy. I mean, it is below the easy threshold, but if you go up to like 7, it's still only hard. If you go to like 9, did that actually, yeah, that recalculated, that's still hard. 10, you finally get to deadly, and it's barely over if you look at this adjusted XP versus the deadly XP. Like, you could have 4 on 10 and reasonably have your 10th level characters win. So how do you build something around the Azer, especially if you want to do something in a campaign? A one-shot would be a whole lot easier. You simply keep your player level lower. So let's just do this one shot. I would probably base it around as there are letting creatures through from the fire, or the plane of fire, the elemental planeful fire. And there you go. Like, that's for one shot, something as short as 4 hours. That's probably what I'd go with. I'd maybe give them a bit of a reason for it. Like, okay, why are they doing this? Maybe there's some prime, like, desert location that they're trying to bring the elemental plane of fire onto the material plane. Or maybe it's there's like a thin spot where they already kind of spend some of their time on the material plane, and humans are encroaching, or beings are encroaching on it of some sort, so they're sending stuff through to keep people away. That'd be a simple enough thing. Another thing that I would consider doing is maybe you don't even have them letting creatures through. It could be the Azer are going to villages trying to find materials they can use to make more Azer. That's probably what I'd lean towards going with. It makes them a little bit sympathetic as a bad guy, but it's reason enough for the heroes of your game to try and stop them. But how would you create a campaign around them? I think this is something I looked at them today and have kind of been trying to figure out how to do that. How could you create a campaign around the Azer when they're not that strong? And they're created so it doesn't seem like you would have a ton of variation in terms of strength of the Azer. Whereas, so like with angels, we could make them kind of the kickoff point and potentially the blocking point for the players. But with Azer, it's going to be hard to get your players into assuming that the Azer are the good guys. People are going to assume that the Azer are the bad guys simply based off of the way they look. The fact that they come from the elemental plane of fire doesn't help a ton either. So let's go back and think about how can you create a campaign, especially if you want something where your players level up. Even if, say, you want to go for a year, reasonably you would want your players at level 8. Most people are going to level up at that speed, 8 to 10, maybe even 12 by that point in time. And sure, you could do it a whole lot slower, but then you're kind of taking out some of what Dungeons and Dragons is, and it's getting those new cool abilities that you might not see if you keep it at a very low level. So there are a couple different options that I can see. One is to make the Azer tougher. Making them tougher would make it a bigger threat. Looking at the stat block for them, they have 39 hit points. Double it. Now they're a whole lot harder to kill because they have a 17 armor class. Or with their Warhammer attack, you could simply double the numbers for that as well, and you have a much stronger creature that's going to be a bit more of a threat to your players. The other thing you can do is maybe not all Azer are created equal. Maybe you have someone who is stronger, or finally you could use them as a kind of a foot soldier thing. And I think this is what I would lean towards. And I probably even excuse me, I'm reading one thing quick here. I would maybe even make that one stronger Azer who is in charge of them. There's no reason that you really can't, since they are created, and maybe even imbue them with like some sort of special power. Maybe they have some magical ability. Now, how do you pick? Like, what do you choose to do when you want to make them stronger? One thing I would consider doing, and I'm going to put a marker in so I have that saved so I can flip over, would be somewhere along here. I have dragons. Like, dragon? Why would that you go with a dragon? Let's see, dragons. Black, green, give me ways down, white, red. Reason I'm hopping to red is red dragons are fire based. You have a bite and a claw attack. Doesn't make a ton of sense. You could just go with it being a weapon of some sort, and you have fire breath. Fire breath, I mean, they are beings of elemental fire, still doesn't make necessarily a ton of sense to have them breathe fire. Instead of having them breathe fire, you could have them have an ability. Ooh, that got all wonky. Hopefully it bumps back so it looks good. There we are. Which is probably really delayed for you because it runs on a few second delay when I see it on the screen for YouTube. You could have them have some sort of staff. There's no reason you can't have a staff that recharges. So, assuming we take that young red dragon, or I could even do a wormling red dragon if you wanted to. That way you would simply have one weapon attack and one fireball ability, basically. But that's only a challenge rating of 4. Challenge rating of 4, let's hop back here. Just for the fun of it, let's say 8. And so 1. Challenge rating of 4 gets us 1100. Calculate it out. That's trivial. But now if we add a row in and have 4,500, calculate. Now it's hard. And that's probably what I would lean towards. I think we could maybe even go up another 1 there. Calculate. Ooh, can we get all the way up to 6? Yeah, I would say we could go all the way up to 6. It'd be really a little bit difficult for the characters, but you could do some fun things with that. So let's hop back over to the notes here. And so the idea for the campaign is we have one Azer who is trying to what? What's this one main Azer doing that he's recruiting the others for? Trying to create volcanoes on the material plane so that Azer can, so that he can rule it. So there we have kind of that one a little bit more powerful Azer. He has a reason for doing something. So why do the characters then care about that? I mean, obviously they want to stay alive, but what draws them into that originally? I would think that there's a volcano that pops up near where they're at. Like, that can actually be the whole first session. Escaping a volcano that appears in the mountains and goes down around where your players are. If there's no one extra P there. If there's no good reason for the volcano to appear, players are going to be like, I think we need to check this out, or we need to find out something about this. And so I would say that I pitched this kind of to the players as like a mystery epic fantasy sort of game. So in session 0, you would kind of be like, hey, this is an idea I have for a game. this kind of mystery. You have to figure out what's going on, but something weird's happening. And if there's buy-in for that, then go with that. I think it makes a ton of sense to do. And something that you can get buy-in on from the players. So then spend some time in the next few sessions after that letting them try and find out what's going on. Like after the initial eruption, the volcano can kind of steady itself, not be as nearly as much of a threat, and give your players like something that'd be useful for them. Like they can go to the biggest town nearby, or maybe there's a religion that's nearby that would have 4 rings of heat protection. Basically, like it's not going to stop them from getting burned, but if you're going to go traipsing around a volcano, just simply make it so that your characters or your players can do so. Don't make it difficult for them, especially this early in the game. There's no reason they should have anything that can help with that. Just give them something instead and keep it really simple. It doesn't have to be anything more than simply, you don't have to worry about heat exhaustion. Like you're not going to get burned by walking near the lava. You will get burned if you fall into the lava, so don't test that out because you will die immediately if you step into the lava. But you can survive for a little bit. So probably the 2nd through 6th sessions, it's mystery time. Find out how the volcano came to be. And this is kind of like what I would say is the opening act to this. And this is where they should get introduced to the Azer at. Keep it pretty simple. Like they're very, very low level. So let's go back to this counter generator. Assuming they're first level, let's just say. Let's remove a row. 450. That's deadly to them. 4 first level characters, that is quite deadly. You think about it, probably the average hit points for a first level character. I really wish this would cover the screen better. Let me try one thing. I'm losing a little bit. Screen capture, settings, maybe this one. Yeah, close enough. Let me see. Set that there. So this will jump. Whee! A little bit smaller, but now you can actually see all the numbers. Sorry about that before. So, I mean, just looking at it, they probably can take one on, especially if you want to mess with it a little bit. There's also no reason why they should come across a full strength one of these. Maybe this is someone who was left behind, but I'd also consider doing, because they're weak or were injured in something, I'd also very much consider having these players at the 2nd level. And then it becomes a medium battle. You can level them up from level 1 to level 2, I would say, at the end of session 1. and then let them run in level 2 till they figure out that it's the Azer. And maybe it takes them a couple of times battling different Azer. Just don't give them a chance to rest. Then that medium for the first time is definitely medium, but for the second time it's going to become even hard. That's going to be harder. It's going to be like it doesn't scale perfectly to say like, oh, if you calculate for 2, that's going to be very deadly, about a 500 over. It's not going to scale that way, but maybe if you calculated for 1.5 monsters, which this won't do, it would make more sense. So yeah, that would probably take you about to where you want to go in terms of difficulty. So have your characters explore, study, and have another volcano pop up kind of in the same area as well. Studying, exploring, new volcano in the same area. So simply by doing that, now you have basically a way for them to test their hypothesis when they meet the first Azer that they do meet. If they're like, well, this creature is made of fire, maybe they have something to do with it, but by the time they see a second one, they're going to be like, this might seem a little bit more like something. About this time is when I would level them up. 7th, and this would be 7th through who knows how long. But I would probably take a trip at this point in time, now that they have an idea of who it is and kind of where they've come from, have them take a trip to the elemental plane of fire. Again, they have the rings, so the temperature there isn't going to be an issue for them. Visit the elemental plane of fire. And the reason for doing this is the elemental plane of fire should really be kind of the launching point for your Azer. So if it's the launching point for your Azer into the material realm, there's probably something that they're doing over here that is causing the rest of the world or the material plane to then superheat and have a volcano come up. So let them find, maybe on the second volcano that they go and explore, and they end up in the elemental plane of fire, let them find like the remains of whatever you want to say this spell, this ability, this incursion into our realm looks like. And then as they step out of that area where they're at, let them see something that looks like or even see a handful of these things or more, where it's like, well, we can see all these things that look like they're getting ready to put volcanoes together. And then you have like a number of quests for them to do. Find how they create volcanoes and a way to stop them from the elemental plane of fire. Too long. Enter. Delete space. So this is kind of like the ramping up second act sort of thing. And you'll notice one thing, if you were to run this, when you look in the book, you will see that the only language the Azer know is Ignon. just change that. Give them common as well. It's easy enough to simply add common to them, and they are going to, and your players are going to then be able to talk with them and kind of get an idea of exactly what the dear old Azer are up to. And towards the end, like as your players get better and better throughout this, and you can level them up, make the defenses stronger around it. It doesn't only have to be like you're fighting an Azer. That is what you have to stop as your defense. I'd also consider going with something like, okay, you're fighting an Azer. However, this Azer, or you're going to fight some Azer. It's going to be a part of what you do. However, with this, then they set up fortifications, they set up traps, they set up all these different things to try and keep your players from knocking down all of their cool volcanoes that they're going to set upon the material plane. And let the Azer level up their defenses faster than the players can, or than the players level up. Make something at some point in time so tricky that the players can't defeat it. That volcano gets created whether or not the players want to. And when I say whether or not the players want to, don't make it so that the players just automatically fail. Give them a way to do it, or give them points for creativity if they come up with a way to do it. Don't squash that. But just make it harder. The bad guys do not have to level up at the same speed as the characters. Or maybe even you bring in that wormling dragon a whole lot earlier. So the bigger, badder Azer a whole lot earlier, and say at 4th level, him with like 6 other Azer, much trickier to deal with. They can even complete the ritual, or whatever you decide it is. Maybe it's a mechanical effect or something like that. With the Azer would make sense. Just change it up. Change up the environment, and don't make it easy for your players to go just visit wherever they want. Let's just hop over to here, and we can go creatures from the elemental plane of fire. And I'm hoping this will give us some sort of list. Somewhere on here, I'm sure it will. Inhabitants. Nope. Fire bats, fire snakes, salamanders, magmen, Azer, brass and gold dragons, Efreet, fire giants, hellhounds, Mephits, Pyrohydra. There are a lot of different creatures that you can use in this situation, and you saw how easy it was to Google it. Just go ahead and Google it when you need to and pick what makes sense for your game. And that can even be like some of the twist. Maybe this strong Azer has some way to control fire giants, or maybe maybe your characters get kidnapped at some point of time by a salamander or something like that. They could be kidnapped by a fire giant and brought into the city of Brass, if you have that in your world. Because, again, you don't have to use the world that is created in Dungeons and Dragons, but the Forgotten Realms. But if you want to go with it, use the city of Brass. That gives you some way where for your characters to play. Maybe it is that the big bad guy doesn't leave the city of Brass ever, so they're going to have to go there eventually, and then they can weigh their options of, do they think they're strong enough to go there yet? Are they going to be able to deal with the monsters that live there? How are they going to deal with the fact that they're going to stand out like a sore thumb? And so I would just use this time to build towards that and keep it varied in how things are. But then eventually you need to kind of set up this final conflict. And you have to figure out what level your players are going to be at that point. Do they have any allies? Even if they do, just simply create battalions of... So, using allies in combat is interesting. There are a couple ways to do it. And I'll probably be slightly blasphemous here. Don't use any of them that Matthew Mercer does. I mean, he only uses one, really, which is he runs the allies. Do not do that. That is the dumb way to do it. Go with, instead, either just create side skirmishes. Maybe they've gotten the help of a friendly fire giant, or a fire giant who doesn't like the big bad of this game. Create side skirmishes. The big bad is not going to be poorly defended, so simply create cinematic moments that you can narrate quickly about what these guys are doing to help them by keeping dozens of Azer off them. Or the other option, maybe there's only one or two allies. If there are one or two allies, create a character sheet for them and hand it to your best players. If you have two allies, figure out the people who are going to be able to handle it the best and give it to them. Let them run it. You already have enough to do running the bad guy, and they have plenty to do running their character as well. But if you're running the bad guy, and in this case the bad guys are young or wormling red dragon statted Azer and like 5 or 6 other Azer, that's way too much. Another thing to do simply would be, let's look at the Azer here. We have, say we wanted 6 regular Azer. They have 1 attack, so you're rerolling 6 attacks plus your big bad guy, so you'd be rolling like 8 attacks and having like 7 turns potentially. Combine Azer, make them into groups. You'll notice that I'll do this in Dungeons and Flagons, for example, with the Shiny Lava Men. With the Shiny Lava Men, I only rolled a few times. I rolled more than I actually wanted to in that, and more than I should have. But create clumps in the initiative order where you can just roll a handful of dice and call out the ones that hit. So if the players are even by themselves, and say you're doing 6 Azer and a Wormling Red Dragon for Azer, for example, that's 4 groups that you're going to be using, in 4-player turns. When you do those groups, simply grab 2d20s, roll them at once. Always have the groups attack the same person. Keep it really simple and really fast. The game is not about your Azer fighting people. The game is about your PCs fighting the Azer. So those are just some of the things to think about, and for having a very limited idea of what I wanted to do in this one, when I was thinking about it, I actually kind of like this game. I think it has some intriguing things. I think you can also play it pretty quickly. It definitely is a campaign that would have a shelf life of how long you can continue going, because this 7 through whenever sessions before you meet the big bad guy, a lot of it is going to be coming up with new and clever ways for the Azer to try and stop your players. And use what the Azer are good at. They are masters of metal and gems. Keep it thematic, and maybe even have that head Azer be smart enough to recruit some fire newts or whatever, some creature that can speak, then convince the Ifrit that your PCs are the actual problem, not the Azer, for a little bit. And so now you have somebody else for your characters to deal with that makes logical story sense. But yeah, so this would be a game that, as it goes, I would definitely consider running. I like my Angel idea better, I'll be honest. I had put more thought into that one ahead of time. I wasn't even sure until 30-40 minutes before the stream who I was going to use, but the Azer made a ton of sense. So there we go. We have just a couple of little ideas for one shot and what could be a pretty fun campaign if you really wanted to use Azer, a creature that I don't think I would ever consider using as your big bad guy, as a big bad guy in a campaign. And with that,